Whenever you think we can start, I will announce you, Dejan. So
Okay.
Maybe we can start, and whoever joins us, that's fine. They are welcome.
Yes, he's welcome. Yeah, of course. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just a quick announcement. I'm very happy to announce our today's speaker. It's Dejan Dželebdžić. He's one of the members of our core group here at Science, Faith, Superstition team. And he's professor of the Department of Classics here in Belgrade. His main focus is the middle period of Byzantium. But today he's going to go back in time to the early centuries of this new era. Now the Zoom is yours.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Liam. First of all, First of all, I also like to I would like to express my gratitude because I'm the member of this team and of this team project, Science, Faith, and Superstition, in the frame of which we already have been organizing, as all of you know, a series of lecture, and many of you already are familiar with it since you have contributed to this project, either by providing lecture or by attending and participating in the discussion. Each lecture explored either one single part of this three-part structured project, namely science or faith and superstition, or a relationship between two or all three parts. I decided to focus my research primarily on superstition, which is therefore and the topic of this evening lecture. What is superstition? First, in my opinion, superstition might be defined. It is not a perfect definition, of course, but let's try with the definition that it is a religious belief that can be quite widespread in certain society, but at the same time, it is persistently being disapproved by some individuals who mostly belong to the same society, not necessarily. I'm aware that this definition, as I said, probably has some shortcomings, but what it tends to emphasize is that superstition does not exist in itself, but only in relations to its critics. In other words, only if someone criticizes one's belief as false, untrue, or foolish, or anything else, and then labels it superstition, the superstition comes into being. The superstition is not simply a religious belief. It exists only through negative conception of that belief. I shall not proceed further in speculations like this about superstition. My scope is to examine it from the historical point of view. That is how the concept of superstition was developing through antiquity and Middle Ages. I think that it is not wrong to distinguish three stages: the Hellenistic period, early period, till late antiquity, then late antiquity, and finally Middle Ages. In this lecture, I shall speak only about the first phase, from the beginning till the late antiquity. When the notion of superstition first emerged in early Hellenistic era, it was named disidæmonia. The notion was new, but the word itself wasn't, since in the survived Greek texts from the 5th and late 6th or beginning of the 5th century, it was composed. Now I can share screen to show my first slide. Can you see this? Yes?
Yes,
Okay.
we see.
Okay. It is the etymology of this word. The word was composed from the aorist stem des and of the verb deido, that is an epic perfect from the first person singular, which means to fear, to be afraid. And from the noun demon, meaning demon or good, or gods, sorry. Thus, the literary meaning of this compound noun is fear or demon or good, which is actually a synonym for eusebia and designates a basic religious sentiment, and as such, in the beginning had a positive notion. With this meaning, the word disidæmonia appears in all survived classical texts and can be sporadically found later by various authors from Hellenistic, Roman, and even Byzantine times. This original meaning, however, is losing its grounds during the Hellenistic era, when the prevalent meaning becomes superstition. I shall just note in passing that this word has exactly the same meaning in modern Greek as well. The first known author who uses the word disidæmonia in the later meaning is the peripatetic philosopher Theophrastus. In his famous work entitled Characters, there are in total 13 examples describing the superstitious man. All of them have the same two-part structure. In the first part, a dangerous situation in which the superstitious man might find himself is described, while in the second part is described the action he undertakes in order to eliminate the threat. The common feature is that the described situation is considered, of course, by a superstitious man as a bad omen, suggesting that one who witnessed it will be harmed by demons, and therefore that situation always terrifies him. On the other hand, the reactions of the superstitious considerably vary, and they include performance of primitive magical practice and prayer for divine help, making sacrifice, or even establishing a new shrine. Let us now see one example from Theophrastus' book. I give both Greek text and English translation, but I shall read only English translation. If a weasel runs across his path, or the path of superstitions, of course, he will not proceed on his journey until someone else has covered the ground or has thrown 3 stones over the road. Today, everyone is familiar with this example, especially if you change the animal, instead of the weasels, a black cat. This, of course, does not mean that the notion of superstition remained unchanged through the centuries. In this simple, and not only in this one, in this example, and not only in this one, the superstition has 2 options. First, he can simply wait until someone traverses the ground between him and where the animal passed. In that case, this person will probably take on himself the harm. Or the second, he should throw 3 stones over the road. Throwing stones over the road is undoubtedly a magic practice, since the superstitious believes that in that way he can drive away his bad luck. This is also suggested by the fact that the superstitious throw stones for 3 times, given that the number 3 was common in magic and ritual practices. Let us see another example. When he sees, according to the superstitious, when he sees a snake in his house, he invokes Sabazios, if it is the reddish-brown one, and if it is the holy one, he sets up a hero shrine there and then. When he sees a snake The two things in this example are to be noted. Firstly, a simple magic practice like the one from our first example now is not sufficient, so that the superstitious must invoke a god or even erect a shrine in his own house, which depends on which kind of snake had appeared before him. Similar reactions can be found and elsewhere in Theophrastus' text when, for example, the superstitious invokes the goddess Athena when he sees an owl, or performs an apotropaic sacrifice if a mouse nibbles through the bag used for keeping cereal. It can be read as satiric, but not necessarily this thing. Secondly, it should be noted that if one encounters a snake in his own house, it is in ancient sources commonly taken as a prodigy. One could refer to such authors as Cicero or Livy, but also to the lemma of the 10th century Pseudo-lexicon. Xenocratis philosophos sine grapsato to episkopikon ionisma oti ion ientistegie fani realis office to decimen. Philosopher Xenocratis wrote, being based on the omen seen in the house, as follows: if in the house appears weasel or snake, this means. In this passage, alongside to the snake is joined the weasel that we already met in our first example. Suda does not explain how the appearance of snake or the weasel in the house should be interpreted, which is not particularly important for us. But one important thing that this passage shows is the following one. Superstition and future telling have much in common. Both are being occupied with the same animals, and therefore indicate, in my opinion at least, that they both are rooted in the same primitive religious beliefs. Be as it may, this connection is strongly supported by two other Theophrastus examples. The first one is if a mouse nibbles through his bag. It is the example we already referred to. The superstitious will visit the interpreter to ask him what he should do. The second, when he has a dream, he will visit dream interpreter, soothsayer or ogre or bird watcher to ask him which god or goddess he should pray to. Here, for one more time, we encounter a situation in which there are alternative options depending on what kind of dream the superstitious experienced. I believe that quotations we have seen on this slide. You can see this reddish-brown snake. It is the first snake which is mentioned in this previous, and it is recently identified with this one. Yes, it is 4-lined snake. I believe that the quotations we have seen are sufficient to get a general picture of the character of the superstitious man as depicted by Theophrastus, but others can be added in passing. For example, if an owl disturbs his walk, or he sees a madman or epileptic, the superstitious senses a threat and takes measure to avert it as well. Many people in antiquity probably shared beliefs and fears of the superstitious man, and many were familiar with his religious practices. On the other hand, the behavior of such a person certainly was not totally common. These two were observed and concisely described by James Digley, who 15 years ago published a very good scholarly edition of a Theophrastus text, accompanied with the English translation that is several times have been used in this lecture. Digley specifically wrote, it was from Pseudo-lexicon, Digley, the actions of the superstitious man and his attitudes, taken one by one, would probably not have seemed abnormal to the ordinary Athenian. What sets him apart is the obsessiveness and compulsiveness of his behavior. This characterization may refer to the mental illness that is in psychiatry today known as obsessive-compulsive disorder. It is suggested through the vocabulary used by Degal, namely the collocation obsessiveness, compulsiveness, plus the word behavior. Let us now compare the Degal's definition of the superstitious man with the definition of patient who has the OCD symptoms that is found on the web page of the US National Institute of Mental Health. This definition is: obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, is a long-lasting disorder in which a person experiences uncontrollable and recurring thoughts, obsessions, engage in repetitive behaviors, compulsions, or both. People with OCD have time-consuming symptoms that can cause significant distress or interfere with daily life. However, treatment is available to help people manage their symptoms and improve their quality of life. Degal presumably wanted to suggest that some interconnection between the superstitions and OCD could exist, but he was cautious and avoided to proceed in further speculations. This, however, may raise the following question: would it be justified and truthful to examine an ancient superstitious man using modern medical science? In my opinion, such a research would hopefully provide us with some new insights, but I believe that it would be wrong to identify the superstitious with the ill one. At least one difference is quite obvious. While the ill person of nowadays could be, but it is not necessarily obsessed by religious beliefs, and even more rarely perform religious practices, the superstitious is inevitably obsessed by religion. If one takes a look at what are common obsessions on the above-mentioned web page, one will see that only 1 out of 6 obsessions of such a person would be religious. We have these 6 obsessions, and as you can see, only the 5th one, unwanted, forbidden, or taboo thoughts involving sex, religion, or harm. It is the only instance where religion appears. Yeah. Other 5 common obsessions, as you can see, have nothing to do with religion. The same is true for common compulsions. Only one compulsion is a religious action, while the others have nothing to do with religious belief. Praying and repeating words silently can be considered, but I think that this definition is not precise enough. Yes. Before leaving this question to the specialists to deal with, if there is any interest from their part, I should just indicate that the ancient Greek medical science often treated any kind of fear as disease, in the similar way as they do with inflammation of the brain, phrenitis, cold or shivering, freaky. The reason for making these interconnections seems to be clear. All of the mentioned diseases may cause trembling of the body, just as extreme fear can do the same sometimes. Why this, however, would be of any importance when we are concerned with superstition? Because in the Hellenistic ethical philosophy, superstition is regularly regarded as a kind of fear, as we immediately shall see. In the first sentence of the chapter on the superstitious man, Theophrastus gives a concise and first known definition of superstition. Superstition would seem to be cowardice with regard to the divine, delia, cowardice, delia, in regard to the divine. This definition seems to be a commonplace, since it can be found in many ancient Greek authors. Many modern scholars believe that it is simply deduced from the etymology of the Greek word disidæmonia, which we have already referred to. The definition, however, first of all, should be understood in the context of the Hellenistic ethical philosophy. Hellenistic philosophers normally regarded disidæmonia as pathos, which is usually translated into English as affection or passion or emotion. But concerning the last one, it should be noted that the term is normally referred to immoderate emotions only. Yeah. This approach was common in Hellenistic philosophy in general, but above all among the Stoics. They were particularly concerned with affections and developed their theory about them. They sought to be free of them because they regarded them being contrary to nature and harmful because they disturbed the right judgment. Let us take as an example Chrysippus of Soli, the head of the Athenian school who lived in the 3rd century before Christ. It is Chrysippus. Chrysippus wrote one treatise entitled On Affections in 4 books, but only fragments have been preserved. Major fragments come from the 1st and the 4th book, very small ones from the 2nd, while from the 3rd book hardly anything survived. According to Chrysippus and other Stoics as well, there are 4 generic affections: pain, lipe; pleasure, hedone; fear, phobos; and desire, epithymia. These 4 are arrived at by taking a pair of affections directed to the present and a pair directed to the future. One of each pair involving apparent goods and other apparent evils. This could be presented in the following manner. It is this slide. We have 2 factors. It is time and it is object. Time can be future and present, and object apparent good, apparent evil. These 2, time and object, constitute a specific of one of these generic. Yes. Some further clarifications by Brad Inwood, who is a specialist in Stoic philosophy, will be welcome, I think. Fear and desire, says Inwood, are the primary types. They are concerned with the apparent good and the apparent bad in the future, as objects of striving or avoidance. The other 2 types also deal with the apparent good and bad, but in a reactive way. Desire is what we feel about, what we believe to be good, do not have, and might be able to get. Pleasure is what we feel about, what we believe to be good, and believe we have. Conversely, for fear and pain, it is because people are wrong about these values that their reactions are excessive and inappropriate. Saying that fear is affection related to something that will or might happen in the future is in agreement with the definition of fear that is to be found already by Aristotle, who says that fear is defined as expectation of the evil. The phobon horizonte prosdokia kakou. This aspect of disidæmonia is not covered by the short definition given by Aristotle's pupil Theophrastus that we have seen, but all his examples clearly demonstrate that evil is not present, but that it is expected to come in near future. All other affections that exist are subsumed under these 4 generic ones. Many Stoics propose their own classification of affections in trying to achieve a perfect one. Although the number of passions in each class often varies, all classifications are in essence similar to each other. Some of the affections that are most often subsumed to fear are hesitation, oknos, agony, agonia, shock, ekplixis, shame, eschini, panic, thoribus, superstition, disidæmonia, fright, deos, and dread, dima. As you can see, some of the affections are for us expected and understandable, such as shock or fright. Others, however, are probably unexpected, such as hesitation and shame. In that case, definition that is given for each affection is helpful. All definitions are very short. Yes, but we have definition for every single affection. Thus, the hesitation is fear of future activity. Oknos de fovus melusis energias. Yes, hesitation is fear of future activity, while shame is fear of bad reputation. It is also kind of fear of bad reputation. Superstition certainly belongs to the former group, that is, to those affections that one would expect to be included in the list. For the pathos of disidæmonia, in most cases, one will encounter definitions that are similar to that of Theophrastus, but one that is preserved by Ioannis Stobius has one interesting addition. Ioannis Stobius preserved one definition as superstition is fear of gods and demons. It is interesting only because it is the rare case that distinction between gods and demons is made. That's why I note this. In another definition that is attributed to Chrysippus, there is also an interesting and very important addition, but it is of other kind. Superstition is fear of divine or an exaggeration of the worship of gods. It is this addition, exaggeration of the worship of gods, which is rarely found elsewhere, if anywhere. The second part of Chrysippus' definition is missing elsewhere, but it involves the descriptions of compulsive reactions of the superstitions given by Theophrastus and confirms that they should not be understood as merely satiric and exaggerated, as some scholars sometimes do. It is possible that subsequent generation of Stoic philosophers further developed the theory of affections. Namely, this is perhaps indicated by the fact that Antipater of Tarsus wrote a treatise entitled On Superstition, Peridisidæmonius. That is also possible that this treatise represents general interest of this author for religion. From the titles of some of his writings that almost entirely have been lost, including, unfortunately, and this treatise on superstition. Like Chrysippus, Antipater was the head of the Stoic school in Athens in the second century, two generations later. As a matter of fact, the only preserved ancient treatise on superstition was written by Plutarch of Chaironea, and I shall now turn to it. A modern portrait of Plutarch from his homeland, yes, in Chaironea. Plutarch's attitude against superstitious beliefs and practice is so much uncompromising that some scholars believe that he might produce this text as a representative of the temple of Apollo in Delphi, where he was serving as a priest for about 3 decades. Nevertheless, his essay is a charming piece of literature that abounds with various anecdotes vividly depicting the ancient world, which is characteristic for his opus in general. Plutarch's main thesis is that atheism and superstition are two vicious extremes in the middle of which the virtue of piety and euseria is situated. This thesis is explicitly exposed only in the last 14th chapter of the treatise, while the comparison of atheism and superstition is present throughout the essay. But of both, superstition is, according to Plutarch, worse because, like atheism, it is accompanied by emotion of fear. Again, pathos of fear. In fact, Plutarch exposed this thesis in medias res, namely in the very first sentence of his essay. You can read this here. Ignorance and blindness in regard to the gods divide itself at the very beginning into two streams, of which the one produces atheism in hardened characters, as it were in stubborn soils, and the other in tender characters, as in moist soils, produces superstition. Every false judgment, and especially concerning these matters, is a mischievous thing, but where emotion, pathos, also enters, it is most mischievous. For every motion is likely to be a delusion that rankles. And just as dislocations of the joints accompanied by wounds are hardest to deal with, so also is it with disorders of the soul accompanied by emotion. Thus, theological ignorance produced both atheism and superstition. In other words, theological ignorance, which is ignorance and blindness in regard to the gods. Theological ignorance produces both atheism and superstition. But which one of the two will be produced, it depends on one's character. If one has hardened character, he will become atheist. If one has tender, soft character, he will succumb to superstition. Thus, the major factors that cause appearance of superstition, according to Plutarch, are absence of theological knowledge and the varying human nature, changing human nature. But what is about emotion? What is the place of emotion in his stand? What is the role of pathos, or fear, in the Plutarch's view? From the paragraph cited above, it seems that Plutarch claims that pathos is a mere addition, in Greek, ke pathos prosesti, which further complicates things. This is also suggested by the last cited sentence, in which a medical imagery is used. Dislocation of the joints is the main problem, while the wounds are just additional one. Similarly, disorder of the soul is main problem, while passion is just accompanied. However, if one reads the rest of the essay, it becomes clear how much the things are getting worse when the superstitious fear is involved. Throughout whole work, this obsessive superstitious fear has a central position, and therefore it would not be exaggeration to say that it is the main subject of the treatise. Namely, out of 14 chapters of this composition, all chapters from the 2nd to 13th ones are completely devoted to the superstitious sphere. Let us take now a glance at the chapter 3, where Plutarch stated that all passions and disorders of the soul are shameful. It is literary meaning, which in effect means that they are opposing to the virtue. Nevertheless, fear is the worst one because it alone, to cite Plutarch, lacking no less in boldness than in power to reason, keeps its irrationality impotent, helpless, and hopeless. Then he added that of all kinds of fear, the most important and helpless is superstitious fear. This fear is the most important and helpless in the sense that it makes the superstitious man completely unable to act. All in all, it seems that Plutarch's opinion was that superstition emerges from false opinion, but it persists due to the excessive fear. And that's why the priest of Apollo so vehemently attacked the superstition fear in trying to set people free from it. It would be main characteristic of the Plutarch's treaty, at least in my opinion. I shall now turn to one question that has been posed in the literature. Some scholars think that between the superstition depicted by Theophrastus and the one depicted by Plutarch, there is an unbridgeable gap. Some even suggested that what Plutarch is writing about is not superstition at all, but that by using the word disidæmonia, he in fact designates magic. One of these scholars exposed a good deal of data showing that many actions of the superstitions described by Plutarch can be paralleled with contemporary Egyptian magical papyri. Two examples will properly represent this. First, prostrations with the face in the ground, wallowing in mud. Second, the pronunciation of prayers with strange barbaric names and expressions. On the other hand, the same scholar believes that such practices allegedly were totally strange to the superstitions of Theophrastus. However, aforementioned magical practices, prostrations, and invocation of gods can be found in Theophrastus' character as well. As we saw, his superstitions even invoke at least one barbaric god's name if he sees a certain kind of snake in his house. Namely, Sabazios was god of foreign origin, Thracian or Phrygian, whose cult existed in Athens already during the classical period. Moreover, goddess Hecate, who played central role in the ancient magic, appears by both authors. Both are disturbed by dreams and go to dream interpreters to learn from them what they should perform or to which god they should pray. The superstitions described by Plutarch has a lot in common with him, and I cannot see any good reason to characterize the former as light disidæmonia or soft version of superstition, as some scholars have written, and the latter as vicious disidæmonia that blinds reasons, leads to the search for wizards, and then to hateful practices that can induce atheism in those who suffer from it. It was quotation. As I have already shown, the superstitions of Theophrastus is always afraid and seriously obsessed and compulsive. He is also necessarily involved in magic, in the same way his counterpart from Plutarch's essays. The most remarkable difference between them is, of course, the context in which they live, but it is certainly less important than crucial similarities. The polemical tone I've introduced not to criticize those who were led to this conclusion. The material we are provided by our sources is such that it can be interpreted in various ways. I introduce polemics because I think it is the crucial point in understanding what superstition meant in late antiquity and Middle Ages. More about this I shall say in the conclusion. Before that, I have to draw your attention to another piece of the Greek literature. It is the dialogue by Lucian of Samosata, entitled Philopsebdis Iapiston, that is in English usually referred to as lover of lies. Lucian was traveling a lot throughout the Roman Empire, but he was resident and stayed in Athens for about 10 years, where he probably wrote this dialogue, one of his many. The word disidæmonia in the dialogue appears only twice, and only in its closing chapters, not before. Yet it is clear that superstition is its central topic. The dialogue had 3 parts of unequal length. In the introduction, chapters 1 to 5, two friends, Philocles and Tychiades, are talking, trying to answer the question why people so much believe in lies. In doing so, they refer to several mythological stories well known through Herodotus, Ctesias, or Homer, as well as the popular and official legends of the Greek cities such as Athens or Thebes. They agree that one could understand why poets and cities believe in lies. The former do so in order to adorn their literary compositions and to make them more attractive for the reader, while the later do so for the reason of prestige. For both interlocutors, however, the more important question is why learned people, educated people, namely the philosophers, believe in lies as well. In the central part of the dialogue, chapters 6 to 39, out of 40 chapters, Tychiades recounts how he earlier that same day had visited certain wise old man Eucrates, who was still in his house, and how there he was involved in the discussion. Beside, it is a Platonic, it has Platonic smell of Platonic dialogues, of course. Beside Tychiades and Eucrates, there are 5 other participants in the dialogue. 4 are followers of various philosophical schools, 1 Peripatetic, 1 Platonist, 1 Stoic, and 1 Pythagorean, while the 5th is Doctor. This part of the dialogue consists of a series of interesting short stories about supernatural phenomena that each participant, except for Tychiades, witnessed more than once in his life. After listening to them for hours, Tychiades complained to his friend that he was feeling so bad, like those who drink too much wine, that he would like to vomit and to take something that could make him forget everything he had heard this day. In fact, the dialogue provides abundant evidence for religious syncretism of the 2nd century AD, which had been already very developed by that time. We are told not only about magicians and wizards and the sacred or holy names and barbaric expressions they used, and about all books they have in their possessions, but also about the goddess Hecate and the moon that was dropped from the sky in a session, certainly. One all-night session that took place under a full moon and lasted from the midnight till the break of dawn is described. We can read as well how the soul of the dead was invoked, or how a magician healed one ill. In all probability, it was an epileptic, while those who were present saw a black and gray spirit leaving the ill's body. We are also told that one magician from Babylonia, another is Hyperborean, another one Syrian from Palestine, another Arabian, and so on and so on. What Plutarch just hinted at, it was witnessed quite clearly by Lucian, some half-century later. Extremely developed religious syncretism and omnipresence of magic, two characteristics of extremely developed religious syncretism and omnipresence of magic. As such, the dialogue is undoubtedly a valuable source for the historian of religion, despite the fact that the participants and events are no real and that the work is satirical. It is certain that it is not a mere fiction, but based on real social experience. I already mentioned that Lucian used the word disidemony only towards the end of the dialogue, and then as a generic term. All previously described beliefs and magical practices are designated poikilia disidaemonia, manifold disidemonies. The main term, however, used by Lucian is pseudos, lie, in literal meaning lie, but it should be understood as what is false, what is opposite to the truth. The terms pseudos and disidæmonia are full synonyms in this dialogue. But why Lucian, although he uses both, prefers the term pseudos? Perhaps because for him superstition does not have to do so much with emotion, pathos, but rather with false reasoning and knowledge. Although participants in the dialogue show some fear before divine, which is incomparably smaller than one described by Plutarch and Theophrastus, they are rather fascinated by the magician's performances than they are afraid. This shift goes hand in hand with general tendency of the epoch. The word disidæmonia, from that time through late antiquity and later period, is normally used to designate wrong opinion or wrong faith. This can be found in the polemics between followers of different philosophical schools, or between Christians and pagans, or between Christians who follow different dogmas. But in fact, this is not superstition. Disidæmony became just a word used for labeling one's opponent. In conclusion now, only a few words. We have seen that what Greeks considered to be superstition from the very beginning had a magical component. It was used to fight against fear that was produced by different divine signs that they could see anywhere. Hellenistic philosophers based their definitions of superstition exclusively on this kind of fear and called it disidæmonia. The magical component of superstition was almost completely neglected. Chrysippus' definition that we have seen might be the only exception. This magical component of superstition was detected and fought by some ancient authors like Plutarch, for example, but it was in full discovered only in late antiquity by Christians who uncompromisingly were fighting against it, not always successfully. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dejan. It was very interesting and informative. And now I am opening the period for questions. So any questions for Dejan? Rastko, yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Thank you very much, Dejan. This talk got me thinking about a lot of different things. And I could pose many questions, but I chose two of them. Let's say one is let's say harder maybe to answer, and the other one is probably easier. So the harder one is the I want to ask you, what do you think about the definition of superstition as the fear of unknown, or even more technically, let's say, fear of transcendence? Because it seems interesting to me that obviously in these definitions you put forward that they talk about divine, obviously, but it seems to me that maybe this is kind of commonsensical definition in the context of Greek philosophy, let's say. But nowadays we can see that many people that are actually atheists, for instance, they can be also they can also fall prey to superstition, let's say it like that. So are these definitions that include the divine actually, let's say, kind of contextually relative to the period? What do you think about that? Maybe the fear of unknown, or the fear of transcendence, the fear of maybe that could be, let's say, a more holistic definition. And the second question is about that, let's say, magic component. I think that it is an appropriate word. So magic is this action that is used to somehow resolve the emotional process, let's say, of this superstitious emotional process. So the magic is used to remove fear, I guess. So are there any examples of superstitions which don't have this kind of the procedure, this kind of solution to this unpleasant emotion of fear? Thank you.
Yeah. First of all, I think that this all of these definitions are made for one purpose. It is to describe different pathye, emotions, passions, and that's why maybe they're so simple, and maybe they actually didn't try even to define to see superstition really as one separate phenomenon, to understand it from more aspects, different aspects. Yeah, but I think that, as I said, magic actions definitely neglected. They weren't interested in this. Although Theophrastus, in all 13 examples he gave, showed that it was really always present in any kind of reaction. And these practices, magic practices, were used, I think, not to eliminate just fear, but what caused that fear. Yeah. So, as to the translation as divine, it is translated differently. But I think that this kind of divine, it has its origin in the Western languages from Latin, because I think that Cicero tried to translate this as divinum. Yes. So, and from this divine was taken. Yes. As to transcendent, I'm not sure that that kind of they're afraid. The superstitious man is afraid of some sign that he encounter on the road, in his house, or anywhere else, and he's literally afraid for himself, for his life. Yeah. And or any kind of harm, but very in this very literary sense, material that can happen something to him. Yeah. So the main question here is how to understand the word daimon. Daimon, is it what is daimon actually? And from that, it depends also translation. Yes. Is there any difference between God and daimon? We are not sure. For example, in Plutarch's essay, it is very difficult to make distinction what he thinks about this. He usually speaks that he is afraid of not some specific demons or something, but exactly of gods. And because he said that that superstitious is afraid of those to whom he should instead to believe to them and to expect any kind of help and support from them. He's afraid, and it is the biggest nonsense, yes, for him. So that's what I could say. Maybe it depends on what daimon actually is. Yeah.
I was aiming at thank you. I was aiming at this, let's say, spiritual space that actually daimons in any kind of translation fulfill, and that's why I think that maybe the more modern definition is the fear of unknown, because we usually are more skeptical towards that kind of spiritual domain, and they actually that wasn't the case in these times we are talking about. I mean, the Greece. So it was commonsensical for them that daimons exist. Maybe we don't know what they are, or how exactly do they differ from gods. But that's why I maybe thought that the definition that uses the notion of unknown is more useful. But also, I think that there is this kind of fear of, let's say, omnipotent entity as well. I mean, maybe not one entity, but these entities that are feared are probably understood as more powerful than anything that we can actually experience. So that's just a comment about what is the main cause of fear. I mean, the sign is actually never. They don't fear the snake. They fear the something that the snake symbolizes.
Yeah.
What that is, we actually don't know, and they don't know when they fear it.
Yes, but yes, it has transcendental, of course. It has transcendental. This danger. It has a transcendental. It could be say origin, but it is present. It is always present. Yes, before him.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rastko. Anybody else? Any questions? Nastas? Yeah, go ahead, Nastas.
Thanks. Well, first of all, I'd like to briefly thank you, Dejan, for a most informative and pleasant lecture. And secondly, the question I have, that is the questions I have are related. So in a sense, what I'm wondering is, would it be right to qualify superstition as necessarily a bad thing?
So necessarily as
a bad thing, as a thing that we should evaluate as a bad practice, as a bad custom, namely something to be avoided, because I can with relative ease remember a place in Polybius in his histories in the 6th book where he speaks of the greatness of the Roman people, and he says that the foundation of the entire magnitude of the Roman Empire is to be found precisely in superstition, namely in this massive number of silly customs to which people blindly adhere to, because it promotes a kind of discipline. So Polybius would be a good example of an intellectual from antiquity, from the Hellenistic world, who thinks of superstition in a good way. And that also leads me to one further observation, namely, what would be the demarcational line between superstition, that is deisidaimonia on the one hand, and proper religion, eusebia, on the other? Because if one were to look at some of the ordinary customs of the Roman world, let's say, before any battle, one would have to consult chicken. If they were to eat greedily, that would be a good omen, and if they were to reject any food, that would be taken as something terrible, and that was considered the proper religion, for instance. So how could one place a demarcational line between the two phenomena?
I think this second question, I'll start from this point. It is very extremely difficult in ancient world, especially. But I think that the birth of the concept of superstition, I always call this is a philosophical concept, as I said, its birth is due exactly to these efforts philosophers made to make this distinction between these two things. So it is in Roman world, as far as I can see, it is even more difficult because of these things. I think that in Greek world, especially from the in this Hellenistic age, it is maybe more easier because some kind of rituals and something was not of this kind in Roman world and in Roman religion. But still, I think that Theophrastus clearly shows that magic and other things were more present even in Greek and in classical Greek society. There, even more than we can suppose based on sources we have at our disposal. As to your first question, Astas, yes, I think that it is exactly what I said at the very beginning, that in this case, like Polybius, the word disidaimonia actually is not superstition. It is something which is one good, positive sentiment. I think that as well, even in the New Testament, we have by Apostle Paul saying that Athenians are disidaimones. But in good sense, he said, because he saw that they are very have a lot of piety, and they wrote on one stone, yes, that to a known God, which means that they are looking for God actually, and Apostle Paul came to tell them which God they are looking for actually, Jesus Christ. But in that sense, the word disidaimonia can be used, and after Theophrastus, and it is used in by Hellenistic Roman authors, Greek authors of Roman period, of course, and even later in Byzantine period, from time to time, you will find such examples. So it is not, but in that cases, we should be careful and not translate this automatically as superstition, but like piety or something like this. Thank you for questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Nastas. Any more questions? Yes, Gerasimos, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Dejan. Let me lower my hand first. And let me say congratulations on your Greek.
Yes,
very nice to hear it.
Thank you.
So, just a brief question concerning the magical aspect of the term disidaimonia, superstition. Do you think that this magic component or aspect of the term is why it was attributed to certain Pythagorean customs, such as aversion to eating beans or aversion to eating certain foodstuffs?
Probably it could be. but I'm not. I didn't think a lot about things, and now I'm not sure. May I maybe make a direct connection with this thing, because this is they could also, yes, through study of nature, physics, yes, they could come to a different conclusions, and I think that it is a slight different things, yes, than this, but maybe yes, it has some connections. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gerasimus. I have one quick question for the early period when dysdaimonia was used as a good thing, fear of gods or demons, the definition that you started off with. I'm wondering if there was other term like proper, not proper, but being religious or faithful, that could have been used interchangeably with dysdaimonia before it got this bad connotation. So if in other words, was the word did the word designate a proper faith early in the period before it turned into overly religious or in bad being having being overly religious or something like that, like with Plutarch and later on. Just wondering whether it was a good thing and whether it was the same concept as having proper faith or being religious.
I think that is one important feature. It was one important dysdaimonia, that I have some fear of God, and it is present in almost all religions. We have this, that for example, in Christianity as well, yes, we have this, that it is some that you should fear some fear of God. One complex term should be Eusebia. It is really what more complex, and it is what is the right attitude towards religion, towards God, and everything. While dysdaimonia, I think it is only one very important aspect of
it. Okay. So it's not the same, but it's like a proper attitude, but it's just a sub-definition, something like that. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all for coming. It's been really nice to meet you, Gerasimus, and we are going to see you in Belgrade. Looking forward to it. Thank you, Nastas. Hope to see you here in Belgrade as well soon. Our next speaker is Rastko, and his talk is coming up in 10 days, 2 weeks, something like that. But we'll keep you posted, as always. Okay, so see you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.